The other interesting thing about Torben, which relates to what you were saying, is the habit of taking one ball and practicing with one ball, which brings your attention so much more to the one. Because when we play junk tennis, because we have 250 balls, and if you miss, I'm going to hit you another one right away, and now you don't fully engage with that made or missed shot because you're...
That's a very simple and very powerful practice tip. I still remember the first day. I mean, I met Tim, and he agreed to mentor me, and I said, well, fantastic, thank you so much, and, what are you doing next Saturday? And he said, well, next Saturday, why? And I said, well, I don't know how to teach the inner game approach, and so I assume you've been doing this a while, that there's like a manual that you can give me and walk me through it. And he said, well, no, that's actually counter to the inner game idea. What the inner game is about primarily is rediscovering how to learn from your own experience, because we're inundated in our culture and taught in a way by our parents and teachers that makes us dependent on other people for feedback, for telling us what to do, for instructions. And so we're basically completely dependent on others, and we've lost sight of the natural learning ability we have, in which when we hit a tennis ball, we can feel it, we can sense it, we can notice subtle differences each time we hit it, and all of that, becomes good information for improvement. But we've lost touch with that, and so what happens is we become mindless, repeating machines, just hitting balls and not getting much information. The other problem that's part of this context is the culture of teaching and coaching in general, which the medical model in which you go to a coach, whether it's a golf coach or a music teacher or a tennis pro, and the model is, let me watch what you're doing, and then I'll compare it to the model I have in my head that's right and wrong. That's an ideal model. And then I'll compare it, and then I'll give you prescriptive instructions. We even say prescriptive, as part of the mental model, of how I can help get you to conform more to the model in my head. And those instructions, as it turns out, for most people are actually not all that helpful, because it causes them to think too much about what they're doing, and because they're inherently judgmental, whether they realize it or not, it actually reduces the trust that they have in their own ability to learn. Students that I've worked with have come to me, and 7 years later, they're still telling me the reason I'm here is to help fix my backhand. I do X. And I said, well, how do you know you do X? They said, well, my pro told me 7 years ago, and I've never been able to fix it. And I look, and it's like, that's not even the issue at all. He's not doing that at all, but he's got it. He had that lesson, that instruction locked in, and it was still affecting him 7 years later.
The root of the word education comes from the verb educos in Latin, which means to draw from within. What people really ought to do to access the inner game is to allow someone to help draw out of them their inherent competency. Does that mesh?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. The answers, every great teacher has always said the answers lie within. When you rediscover how to get feedback from your own experience and to make subtle distinctions and be able to differentiate between, the feelings that you feel when you hit a ball, like the inflection of your wrist. For instance, if you're paying attention and you suddenly redevelop or develop your kinesthetic sense so that you feel like real subtle differences when the ball meets your racket. So that's like step one. If you can, develop that alone is pretty helpful. But if you then start to notice the ball height over the net, let's say there's a ropaling or, and you suddenly notice that, when I feel this, the ball is a foot under the rope, and when I do this, it's a foot over the rope, and you just start noticing these differences and the height of the ball over the net, all of a sudden, you've got all the information you actually need in order to keep the ball in play.